Good morning, folks. I apologize for my voice. It's not a cold this time, it's allergies. It has been a weird season for me. So I apologize. We're going to try to get through this as well as we can. But yeah, little scratchy voice there. Hey, so yeah, we are back. And let me tell you what we get to do today. So over the whole semester, we've been kind of building up capitalism, kind of exploring what capitalism is all about, what are the aspects of capitalism. Don't worry, I'll remind you of all these things as we get started. But capitalism isn't perfect. It can always be improved. Now, I want to be clear, great system, but even great things can be improved. But in order to improve things, we need to understand what the problems are. It just makes sense. Well, there's a lot of problems. And we actually have two people, well, three, anyway, two people to start with who are going to point out a lot of the problems with capitalism. One of them is Karl Marx, kind of the godfather of communism. And the other is Adam Smith, the godfather of capitalism. And one of the things that we're going to find today is that Marx and Smith actually really agree on the problem. They're good with the problem. They agree on that. What they really disagree with is the solution, okay? So what we're going to focus on today is identifying the problems of capitalism, and then as the semester continues on, we'll talk about the solutions, okay? So let's go ahead and play with this. So the first thing I want to do is let's remind ourselves a little bit of what capitalism is and the pros and cons, the things that make it really fantastic and the things that, well, make it problematic. So the first concept that we'll want to remember is the profit motive. And the profit motive says that, you know what? We always want to strive forward to better our material circumstances. We always want to earn more. We always want to grow more. We always want more opportunity. We want more flexibility, things like this. And yeah, the profit motive is a big driver for me, and it's a big driver for many of us. As a matter of fact, it's the profit motive that has you in class right now. You want more. It's why you're getting a degree. It's why you're increasing your skill sets. It's why you're here getting the extra credit and so forth, because you want more than what you have in your current state. Morning, Tyler. But now there's a problem with this profit motive, and that is that, well, you are going to be constantly dissatisfied with your current state. And you live in your current state. Always. You are never not in your current state, which means if we allow the profit motive to really push and drive us, then we're always in a state of dissatisfaction, a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. That's a problem. Next one is private wealth and capital. It's great, the things that we can invent and build and produce because of investment of capital. There's just no end to the amazing things we can do with the investment of private capital. However, the problem is that this also makes the rich richer because it takes money to make money. So if you have money, you can make money. And so there's this disproportionate distribution of wealth and power. So while you and I are benefiting from the investment of capital, we're not building wealth, we're not building power. But those who are investing the capital, they are building wealth, they are building power. So disproportionate allocation of the wealth and power. Another one is free markets. Free markets are amazing. The reason that everything is awesome, cheap, and always getting better is because of free and open competition. And so, yeah, it's just great. However, in order to keep things going, free markets create these contrived wants and really kind of compel us to always purchase, to always be buying. And furthermore, it means that resources are not always allocated to where there is the greatest need. Resources are allocated to where there is the greatest potential for profit. And sometimes need does not generate profit. But things over here that are not needed, they can generate a great deal of profit. So free market really is attracted to profit, not need. Next one, laissez-faire. Just let things go, and people are going to make decisions that are best for them, and they will vote with their dollars. And if governments and regulations stay out of the way, we can do some amazing things. And we've seen this time after time. On the other hand, a laissez-faire system is an amoral system. It doesn't care about the individual. It cares about the growth and health of the economy. Now, I'm all for a growing, healthy economy, big time. But I'm also for trying to, at least to the degree possible, mitigate for the effects that this economy may have on the individual. And laissez-faire doesn't really care about the individual. And then finally, we had the invisible hand that we talked about. Things just kind of allow spontaneous creation of goods and services, and we all benefit from these. And in looking after ourselves, we look after others, even if it's not our intent. However, not all value that is created by the invisible hand is rewarded equally. So think about in terms of influence and so forth. A high school teacher has much more influence on the future of society than an NFL player. But the NFL player creates more wealth for the economy. And the invisible hand and the economy is drawn toward profit. And so the NFL player is going to make more money, while the high school teacher is going to make significantly less and yet create more social value. But the invisible hand and the economy, they're not really interested in social value. They're interested in monetary profit. Okay, so these are the awesome things about the capitalism, and I'm a big fan. But these are also some pretty significant problems. And one person who was really, really great at pointing out the problems was Karl Marx. Now, to talk about what he's on about, I want you to take a look at these folks. And this is going to be our first 2-minute timer. They're making bread. But what are you observing in this video? And you can start typing at any time. What are you observing? What are they doing with their hands, with each other, with their minds? What are they doing to make this bread? What actions do you observe them making, going about? So, yeah, I'll go ahead and hit the 2-minute timer. Where's that button? Here's that button. And I want you to tell me what you're observing. All right, let's play with this. Okay, let's come on back here. So, yes, we've got our first light bulb. Elisa, you're absolutely right. They're working together. Hang on. There we go. They're working together. They're kneading the dough. They're breaking it up into smaller pieces. These people are collaborating. They are making the decisions on what's in the recipe, how to make it. And so this is a very, very hands-on exercise. They are literally creating bread with their hands, okay? This, as opposed to, what are these people doing? Well, I don't see any people yet. No people. Oh, they're lifting things. Lifting. Okay, dumping. Pushing buttons. We've seen lifting, dumping, pushing buttons. Let's keep going. Lifting, dumping, pushing buttons. Watching. Ooh, somebody's watching to make sure the machine is working. I don't see anybody making bread yet. More machines. I don't see anyone making bread. Still going. You get the idea, okay? So what we have here, picking up, dumping. All right, you get the idea. Here's what Karl Marx we're going to explore this bread making as we talk about Karl Marx's concerns around capitalism, okay? Now, the first thing he likes to say that Our work, what we do, is our species essence. It is how we express ourselves as a species. As it says in the reading, animals are solely trying to survive. Human beings are supposed to be more creative and free. If a person's primary activity is laboring for a wage needed to survive, then they are more like animals than human. They are alienated from their species. Now, you've felt this before. You feel like all you do is wake up, shower, go to work, come home, eat, sleep, wake up, shower, go to work, come home, eat, sleep. You get the idea. It's like, am I just here to work? Is this all life is? A niece of mine, after she graduated from college, she had at this time, just a little job, right? And it's a little job, but college graduate job and so forth. And I used to see her every Sunday. And I had asked her, hey, so how's it going? And she goes, well, living the dream. And I said, I'm really glad you feel that way, because this is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. And this is what concerns Marx, all right? Man is a creature of his species, that he is a conscious being, that he is able to direct his life activity, and that he treats his own life as a subject matter and as an object of his own determination. Alienated labor reverses this relationship. Man, the self-conscious being, turns his chief activity, labor, which should express his profound essence, into a mere means of physical existence. Okay, here's what Marx is saying. When those ladies were making the bread, they were putting of themselves in the bread. Love is the most important ingredient. They were working the dough. They were determining the recipe and how much of things to put in. They were cooperating. They were collaborating. They were assigning tasks. They were making bread. The people that worked in the factory were pushing buttons. That's it. They were there to make sure the machines did their job. The most important thing in the factory are not the employees, it's the machines. You need employees to look after the machines. Push the button, watch the conveyor belt, make sure everything's fine. Marx says this is not how you express your species' essence, by babysitting a machine. This is his concern. So he says that there are 4 types of alienation, all right? And we're going to look at this through the lens of the bread and so forth. So a baker can, they're close to the product. They can make the decisions about the product, versus somebody who's working in a factory is just pushing a button. That's it, right? Furthermore, the baker makes all the profit, whereas in a factory, the owners of the factory and the machines make the profit. So you kind of see how you're alienated from the product. The baker holds up their loaf with pride and sells it and enjoys the profits of their labor, whereas the factory worker doesn't even know they're making bread, and they don't care that they're making bread. They're just there to push the buttons, collect the paycheck, and go home. So, what about you guys? Let's get some light bulbs going here. Have you felt sometimes at work that I don't really care what it is we do. I'm just here to do my job, and collect my paycheck. I do not express myself through my work. I do not express myself in the end product. It's just what I do. Lisa, the small business owner versus the corporate job in a cubicle. Yes. And in many ways, this is one of the reasons that I transitioned my career from a corporate employee in a cubicle to that of an instructor, of a professor, because I have much more influence on how I teach than I had as a middle manager at Intel. And it says, I've felt that way. My first two jobs were in the food service and not my joy. Now I work in childcare, much happier with it. Yes, food service, it's just like, get it done, get it out, get it done, get it out, right? And you're more of a machine than you are an active player working of your own determination. Whereas as childcare, you're putting yourself into that work, right? Great example, great examples. Okay, continuing on. Marx says we are also alienated from our own labor. The baker is involved in every step of the process. What recipe am I going to do? How am I going to set my ovens? How am I going to set up my workspace? How am I going to combine the ingredients? How am I going to do this, that, and how long am I going to bake for? They make all the decisions. Whereas the person who pushes the button just pushes the damn button. They're not involved in anything but the button. They're just selling their mechanical labor for wages. I have a son who early on was working pizza, and he said, I think I'm done making pizza. I want to get a better job. I want to earn more money. And I just threw my mouse. Sorry about that. Let's get back up there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Holy smoke. We're almost there. Okay. Alienated from labor. So in any case, I ask him, well, what can you sell besides your labor? I mean, yeah, all you're doing is what they're paying you to do, but it's just labor. You don't have skills, you don't have technical expertise, you don't have experience, so on and so forth. That's why you get an education or why you get a skill set and so on and so forth. And so if all you're doing is selling your labor, you can't express yourself in that. Over here, Elisa, the skill it takes is minimal in the factory. Yes, and we're going to talk about this on the next slide. Let's go to the next slide, because we're also alienated from others. Because since the work is pretty darn simple and straightforward, anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. And so you're not special, you're not skilled, you're not valued. So right now, I'm doing a job that requires some level of skill. And so I'm rewarded for that. And I'm just, as an example, I'm going to say, therefore, I'm not concerned about you taking my job. Not yet, you will. But right now. Okay. On the other hand, if we were all competing for these factory jobs, you're just as qualified as I am. And so we don't really have much to offer that's unique, which means we are constantly terrified for our jobs. We are constantly terrified that somebody else is going to remove us and replace us. which means it's a race to the bottom. I will work long hours for low pay and poor work conditions because I need to, or somebody else is going to take my job. Furthermore, there's going to be politics and backbiting and backstabbing and mistrust in the organization because we're all looking out for ourselves because we don't have anything unique to offer. So alienated from others. And then finally, we have alienation from ourselves. Labor fulfills our species' essence to create and express ourselves and our accomplishments, but capitalism robs workers of their species' essence, that thing that makes us human. We are denied the opportunity to create, innovate, critically analyze, problem solve, and affect an outcome. That's what I adore about my job. I have the opportunity to create, innovate, critically analyze, problem solve, and affect an outcome. Therefore, I feel I have the opportunity to express my species' essence in my job. But I've had jobs in the past where I didn't feel this at all. And I was depressed. And this is where people run away and hide in, I don't know, whatever your vice is, right? It's just, it's a depressing state to be in because we're alienated from ourselves. We're like, is this all I'm here for? It's a depressing feeling. So, we've already done this, but we're going to do a 2-minute timer. I want you to kind of chime in and say, where have you felt this, or where do you think your parents have felt this? Perhaps your parents have changed jobs so that they could be more fulfilled. Tell me where you have experienced something that feels like this sort of alienation in your own jobs or in your family's jobs, and let's connect the dots. So 2-minute timer. Okay, so while you're continuing to type away, I'll go ahead and share an example of mine. So I worked in a job, I did some graphic art for a newspaper. And the way the group was managed and the things I could and could not do and the schedule I had to maintain and so forth, I felt like I was really, really, really trammeled, really stifled, and I didn't have the opportunity to express myself. You would think I would, doing graphic art and so forth, but with all the laws and rules and regulations they had and so forth, I was not fulfilled. I left that job like 3 months after I started it. We have a few here. So we've got Anna. I felt that way with okay, we had the job services. Anna again, though, and I'll come up to Alyssa, but putting aside my own experiences of going from food service to childcare, my mom actually had the reverse happen to her. She was in a really good job working from home, and then the company went bankrupt. Oh, gosh, that hurts. Yeah. Reverse is almost worse because you know how good things were, and then you go backwards. That's hard. Let's see, I worked at a warehouse and picked out items for an order. It didn't bring me much satisfaction, but then I had an opportunity to move to a different department in customer service. And that's often what we end up doing, right, Alyssa? We do these things because, well, it's going to create opportunities for the future, especially early in our careers. Great example. Anna going on about her mother, the job she has now is far away, and so she has to get up early, come home late, is very tired. Yeah, and so it's wake up, go to work, come home, eat, go to sleep, wake up, go to work. I hear you. Totally hear you. Okay, so here's the thing, though. What we were just talking about is Karl Marx, which, as you know, godfather of communism. So it's easy to kind of brush him aside and say, yeah, you pinko commie socialist. Well, here's the thing, though. Adam Smith agrees. All right? They agree on the problem. Now, I'm going to read this stuff from Adam Smith. Remember, 19th century Scottish philosopher. The language is a little flowery, but I think we'll be able to understand it and explain it. So he says, the man whose whole life is spent in performing a few simple operations, like push a button, of which the effects, too, are perhaps always the same. Pushing the button has the same effect every single time, or very nearly the same, has no occasion to exert his understanding or to exercise his innovation to find out expedients for resolving difficulties which never occur. He naturally loses, therefore, the habit of such exertion and generally becomes as stupid and ignorant as is possible for a human creature to become. The dude is totally trolling the factory workers' plight in capitalism. If all you're doing is pushing a button over and over and over, you're eventually going to become as stupid and ignorant as is possible for a human creature to become. You think that's bad? Check this out. The torpor of his mind renders him not only incapable of relishing or bearing any part in rational conversation, but of conceiving any generous, noble, or tender sentiment, and consequently of forming any just judgment concerning many, even the ordinary duties of private life. What's he saying? He's saying, at a certain point, these people are just going to become ignorant morons. They're not going to be interesting in the conversation. They are not going to be good husbands, providers, and because he's talking men here, but same with women. They're not going to be good spouses. They're not going to be good parents. They're not even going to be good citizens. They're going to be conspiracy theorists that put crappy bumper stickers on their beat up cars and just the worst kind of citizen. That's Adam Smith talking, people, not Marx. Lisa says, I feel like people become numb because they are miserable. Yes, totally with you. All right, so continuing on, Smith goes on to explain that in the current system, and this was when he was around. Remember, rest of the semester, we're going to talk about solutions. But he says in the current system, the worker is screwed. The masters will always prevail. In other words, corporations will always win. He says the workmen desire to get as much and the masters to give as little as possible. In other words, he says, listen, employees want to do as little work as possible for as much pay as possible, while employers want to get as much work out of the employee as possible while paying them as little as possible. So who's going to win? The companies. It's the companies. It is not, however, difficult to foresee which of the two parties must, upon all ordinary occasions, have the advantage in the dispute and force the other into compliance with their terms. I want you to think about that for a moment. Force the other into a compliance with their terms. Matter of fact, I'm going to take a picture of that and include it in something else. Because, yeah, you and I, when we work, we have a contract with our employer. You know, we provide labor, they provide pay. It's an equal contract. I can leave at any time, Slick can fire me at any time, so on and so forth. But who really sets the rules? Slick, or the employer. Why? Well, let's come on over and see what he says. The masters, being few in number, can combine much more easily. In other words, listen, when it comes to all these rich tech bros and executives and so forth, they can organize and combine. Check out this picture, right? Check this out. What do you notice? They're all old white males. And all of these old white males went to the same schools. They all live in the same area. They all vacation at the same place in Kennebunkport. And all their kids go to the same private schools. They are all like-minded. They all have the same goals, principles, and objectives. These people can get along just fine. Whereas you take employees, oh my gosh, there's millions of them, at least hundreds of thousands of them, and they can't agree on anything. They are all different ages, races, ethnicities, religions, backgrounds, genders, and, worldviews, and you name it. They're different in every way possible, and they're spread all over. They have the disadvantage, according to Smith here, okay? Next one, the law, besides authorizes or at least does not prohibit the employer's combination, while it prohibits those of the workmen. Now, back when Smith wrote this, it was illegal to form unions. So that has changed. Yes. But now things have reversed a little bit. So it was illegal to form a union and they were breaking up monopolies. Today, unions have much less power And while there may not be monopolies, we are surrounded by oligopolies. Surrounded by oligopolies. A monopoly is when one company controls it. An oligopoly is when 3 or 4 companies control the industry. And so it's not hard to see that the corporations still have the power in this regard. Also, and I won't read through all this, Smith points out that when there's a dispute, companies can hold out. They're rich and they have investors, and they can hold out and they can downsize and they can cease production. They can do all kinds of things to weather, say, a labor dispute. Whereas the workers, if they don't have a paycheck every 2 weeks, how long can they last? Me, I can probably only last a couple of months. I need the paycheck. Whereas Slick, don't worry, I'm not dissing Slick, I'm just giving the example. They can totally live without me, right? And so if there is a dispute, I need the money. Whereas they can replace me in a heartbeat. A heartbeat. So, yeah, a little trickier that way. So, as I say, they agree on the problems, not the solutions. And history has shown that the solutions offered by Karl Marx have not been good solutions. His solution is seize the means of production, which is to say everything should be owned by the government. In theory, owned by the people, but who are we kidding, right? Everything owned by the government. Doesn't work. Smith's solutions are what we're going to explore going forward and so forth, but it's important to still bear in mind the criticisms that Karl Marx had in his thesis. Okay, so with that, I want to go on to our third reading, which is Mike Lefebvre, Steelworker. Now, this is going to dovetail really, really well, because what I'm going to do is we're going to look at what Mike Lefebvre says through the lens of Karl Marx. Okay? Now, a little background on Mike Lefebvre. He's the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, at least in my opinion. The guy is amazing. Now, he's a hardcore, gristled, blue-collar steel worker out of Chicago and has a mouth and an attitude, but he's freaking brilliant. And so as Studs Terkel here interviewed him and asked him questions, it's just amazing the insights that Mike Lefebvre had. So we're going to go ahead and look at this interview, but through the lens of Karl Marx. So first, Mike Lefebvre says, I'm a dying breed, a laborer, strictly muscle work. Pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. In other words, we already see that he's not really fulfilled in his work. He just sells his labor, right? This is what Karl Marx was concerned about. And Mike Lefebvre totally understands that's who he is. So let's take a look at how he expresses himself. So first of all, remember we had alienation from the product. You don't really feel a connection to the product that you created. Remember, we were talking about bread. The baker can show off this beautiful loaf and say, I made this. Whereas the factory worker who just pushed the button, they're not connected with the product. Let's see what Mike Lefebvre says. You can't take pride anymore. You remember when a guy could point to a house he built, how many logs he stacked? He built it and was proud of it. It's hard to take pride in a bridge you're never going to cross or a door you're never going to open. You're mass producing things and you never see the end result of it. So, yeah, he's alienated from his product because he's just picking up and putting down steel. He can't show you the bridge and say, I built that bridge or built that building. He's just the labor. Then we have alienation from one's labor. Small, repetitive, monotonous tasks doesn't allow ourselves to express ourselves in our work, and we're just really part of the machine. Let's see what Mike Lefebvre says. Somebody's going to build something. Pyramids, Empire State Building, these things don't just happen. There's hard work behind it. I'd like to see a building, say the Empire State. I'd like to see on one side of it a foot-wide strip from the bottom to top to bottom with the name of every bricklayer, the name of every electrician, with their names. So a guy walked by, he could take his son and say, see, that's me over there on the 45th floor. I put in that steel beam. Picasso can point to a painting. What can I point to? A writer can point to a book. Everyone should have something to point to. I love that. Everybody should have something to point to. And he doesn't. What do you have to point to? At Slick, I don't have much to point to. This isn't a criticism of Slick, okay? It's just the nature of the job. Nutshell Brainery, I have a lot I can point to. I can say, you see those 450 videos? I made those, right? So what can you point to? I'd love to see comments. If you have something you can point to and say, I did that, that'd be cool to see. Okay, continuing on. When I did my PhD dissertation, I interviewed a whole bunch of folks, and one of them worked in the semiconductor industry. And this is what he said in my study interview. And this is an example of closeness to the product. This is a good example. He said, being able to point at something and say, I did that, or I worked on that, or your random person on the street can go out and touch this thing that I worked on. The closer that the product that I worked on is to something that somebody would recognize, the better I feel about it. To be able to say I'm one of a couple people that made this happen, that was a tremendous feeling of achievement and was a feeling that persisted. Wow, that's cool. That's really cool, right? We should all have that, says Mike Lefebvre and Karl Marx. Okay, then Karl Marx was talking about alienation from oneself, unable to express your species' essence in your work, denied the opportunity to create, innovate, and critically analyze problems and so forth. By the way, unless I was totally waiting for this. I had a baby and pretty rewarding to point to him. Yes, right? That's one of the drivers of, our drive to procreate is to say, I had something to do with this, right? I hope you always feel that. All right. So, Mike Lefebvre, check this out. I got chewed out by my foreman once. He said, Mike, you're a good worker, but you have a bad attitude. My attitude is I don't get excited about my job. I do my work, but I don't say whoop-de-doo. The day I get excited about my job is the day I go to a head shrinker. How are you going to get excited about pulling steel? I like this because yes, as an organizational psychologist, I do understand that people's attitudes at work can affect other people's attitudes, and that can affect the product. I get that. I understand it. I support it. But you don't have the right as an employer to just insist on a good attitude. You have to provide the environment, the workplace, the relationships, the support that bring about a positive attitude. And if you're just out there pulling steel and being chewed up and spit out and just castigated left and right and looked down upon, you're going to have a lousy attitude, and you have a right to have that lousy attitude. And he's like, hey, I'm doing my job. Leave me alone. Okay, I like this one. I like them all. When I was single, I could quit, just split. I wandered all over the country. You worked just enough to get a poke, money in your pocket. Now I'm married and got 2 kids. Trails off. I worked on a truck dock one time, and when I was single, the foreman came over and grabbed me by the shoulder, gave me a shove. I punched him and knocked him off the dock. I said, leave me alone. I'm doing my work. Just stay away from me. Don't give me with that hands-on business. Well, he says, I would rather work my ass off for 8 hours a day with nobody watching me than give 5 minutes with a guy watching me. Who are you going to sock? You can't sock General Motors. You can't sock anybody in Washington. You can't sock a system. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how often I think of the phrase, you can't sock a system. Who are you going to sock? Who are you going to punch? You don't have the power. Alienation from oneself. You're just a cog in the machine, and you can't even express your displeasure at what's happening. You can't sock a system. Now, like I say, think about that phrase a lot. Now we have not connected from, alienation from others. This is an interesting story. He was in a bar in a college town, and this college kid came up to him in this bar. He saw a book in my back pocket one time, and he was amazed. He walked up to me and said, "You read?" I said, "What do you mean I read?" He said, "All these dummies read the sports pages around here. What are you doing with a book?" I got pissed off at the kid right away. I said, "What do you mean all these dummies? Don't knock a man who's paying somebody else's way through college." He was a 19-year-old effete snob. And yeah, your college education is subsidized 70% by taxpayer dollars, the workers' dollars, the workers' taxpayer dollars. So, yeah, you have tuition, but a lot of it's being paid by tax dollars, and this kid did not understand or appreciate that. So I found that fascinating. Now, here's a little story from me, and I think, that'll be about it. So I used to work at FedEx. Back when I was there, I was actually there during the name change. FedEx was Federal Express. You know that. Well, I was working at FedEx. It was a night job. I was in college. I was doing what you guys are doing. You'll work at night so you can go to school during the day. And I was married with a kid. And I got in trouble. Well, now, I want to be clear. 9 times out of 10, when I get in trouble, I deserve it. I did something to get in trouble. Oh, you didn't even know there was a name change. Yeah, Federal Express. So I got in trouble, but in this case, I didn't deserve getting in trouble. I did not do what my manager said I did. I had nothing. I did not deserve it. And he wrote me up. And so I'm 22 years old and full of righteous indignation. And I said, screw it, I'm going to quit, which is what I would do all the time. Just quit. But then I paused and thought, hold on. FedEx is helping pay for my college. I'm married and have a kid, and I have health insurance through FedEx. I can't quit. And it was the first time in my life that I had that realization. And so I signed the letter of reprimand. And I realized two things as I was signing that letter. I realized that I had grown up and matured a little bit to just take it like a man and move on. I also realized that I had died a little bit inside and that I was no longer my own master. I was now beholden to my wife, to my child, to my employer, to my insurance, and they set the rules and forced me into compliance. It was a tough experience, but one I think about an awful lot. Okay, real quick, Anna says, random thought, but I think the reason that a lot of fast food places have poor customer service is because most of the servers, such as teens who don't care about their job. Yes, that's totally it, right? I mean, that is just
Hi, I'm Captain America, and I'm here to tell you, stay in
16
school, and
ways
that if
from
there's one
Sunday.
thing you're going to learn from this class, it's to endure silliness.
A little story about that, Anna. True story. So I do a little business consulting on the side. I used to do a lot more business consulting, but I was at this networking event, and there was this business owner there. She was like 80 years old. It matters that I explain the age for a moment. You'll see why. And she ran, she ran a catering company. So 80 years old, running a catering company. She pretty much more or less started this catering company when she was 14 years old. She would cater parties and so on and so forth when she was 14. And after high school, just did the business and built this business. And so, yeah, she's been doing it for 66 years, something like that. And she was just complaining that kids these days, they just want to do the bare minimum and get a paycheck and go home. They don't care about the company. They don't care about, our customers. They don't care about saving money through, being efficient. And she was fixated on her company. And she felt that everybody should love the company as much as she did. The company that she built, right? And it's like, woman, nobody's going to love the company like you do because it's your company. Now, I appreciate how you feel about it. I get it. But to then expect these teenagers to have the same devotion to it that you do, you're delusional. You are delusional. So, yeah, Anna, I totally agree. All right. We'll end with a quick quote here from Carl Sagan. One of the saddest lessons of history is this: if you've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. Capitalism, which I am a fan of, it's a bamboozle. There's a lot of problems with capitalism. There's a lot of things that we need to fix. And there's a lot that we can learn from other systems and other philosophies and other economic models, including those from Karl Marx. But the bamboozle is that I'm a pinko commie for having said that, and America, love it or leave it, and it's, how dare you badmouth our economic system, and if you don't like it, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, I really like it. I like it a lot. As a matter of fact, I've lived in 5 countries, and I know that this is the best system I've seen. But that doesn't mean that it can't be improved. Just because something is great doesn't mean it can't be greater. So, yeah, let's think about the system that you're going to be in the workforce for the next 45 years. 45 years you're going to be in the workforce. You want to make sure the system is operating in a way that helps you the most. Okay? Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, that's about how a paycheck is an addictive drug. Yes. I'll end on this note. Okay? I'll end on this, that it's called the golden handcuffs. As I said, I worked for Federal Express and I left. And those that were at FedEx were like, you're crazy. Why would you leave FedEx? Great benefits, strong company, good pay. I was a courier. I drove a truck. Why would you leave this? Well, the golden handcuffs would keep me there. It's like, yes, I'm handcuffed to the company, but they're golden handcuffs. I was addicted to the paycheck, as Kevin O'Leary, right, would say. And you have to say, you know what? I'm not going to put the paycheck ahead of my happiness in my career. And I've had to make that decision several times. There's many times where I have stepped down in my pay, but stepped up in my fulfillment in the job. And I'll make that change, that trade-off any day of the week. It's always worked out. So, all right, folks, you are in great shape. I'm going to go ahead and take a picture. And thank you. Thank you for your contributions. I apologize for my voice. I know it's really hard to listen to, but trust me, it's hard to talk. I got to get past this. As always, I'm going to stick around if you have any questions or any comments and so forth. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and we'll see you again next week, or perhaps tonight at the work shift, or perhaps Friday at the live stream. All right, go off and make some trouble, and we'll see you later. See you later. Holy cow. You bet, Zamara. Thank you. We'll see ya, Anna. We'll see you tonight, Tyler. Have a good one. All right, I see folks dropping off and so forth, so I am going to go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll see you on later.